Bjorn Ironside is arguably one of the strongest epics in Rise of Kingdoms, and so today we're going to give you really great talents to start kicking butt with this commander. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and this video has been sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And if you were wondering about my pronunciation of this commander's name, Bjorn Ironside, although I'm no expert in pronouncing commander names, I will say that I got coaching here from Cortex, our resident Viking. He has confirmed that's how it's pronounced, so there you go. In this video, we will briefly review his skills because it's relevant for understanding why I'm going to make certain talent recommendations. And yes, of course, we'll hook you up with the very best talents for this commander. I actually think it's pretty straightforward which talents you should use. Toward the tail end of this video, we're going to give you the very best pairings for this commander, and I really do feel like he's strong in the early game. He'll be decent in the mid game when you're doing KVKs, seasons 1 through 3, but by the time Season of Conquest rolls around, I think most players will have graduated from this commander. So let's get right into why their skills are good, and by the way, use the timestamps in the description to navigate to whatever portion of this video you're interested in, also chapters in the description. The active skill is what makes this commander really strong. He is increasing the skill damage taken by the target by an upwards of 15%. In fact, with the expertise skill, it's 3 targets, not 1. So his damage only hits 1 target, but the skill damage taken debuff is going to hit 3. Now, without the expertise skill, the active skill is in fact much weaker. It's only 500 damage factor, 10% skill damage taken reduction. But as is the case with most epics, unless you're in like the first days of the Kingdom's Age, right? You're going to be working towards maxing out all your epics and only using the ones that are in fact maxed on the field. Now, Fearless Fighter, this is what makes him good. This skill mandates a rage engine. The whole point of this commander is to have this active skill go off as frequently as possible in big group fights, making all the targets take more skill damage. And you want to have as many people as possible hitting the same targets that are all taking more skill damage so they get melted. That's the whole point of this commander. That's it in a nutshell. The next skill is related to attacking cities. 15% increased attack. Honestly, this doesn't excite me very much. I'm not about city hitting, and I don't think most players really will be doing much of that at all in the game. The next skill is 10% attack and defense. The gains here are linear, so every point gives you the same amount of boost. Some skills are non-linear. The last couple skill ups give you the most extra points. Not the case here. Even skill ups as you go. And the final skill is very strong. 10% chance to proc 800 damage factor. Huge. This is especially strong if it lines up with these skill damage taken boosts that you'll be putting onto the target. This can trigger once every 5 seconds, although it's really more likely to trigger on average once every 15 seconds once you account for the fact that it's got a 10% trigger chance, and it's got a 5-second cooldown after this has triggered. P.S. If you're getting value from this video, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. Thankfully, supporting this commander is 3 talent trees that work really well for firing off active skills very, very quickly. That is Infantry, Conquering, and Skill. And I have this active skill shown on the screen now because this is the thing you need to amplify. The skill damage taken by the target. This is not a buff on your commander. It is a debuff on the enemy commander, making it so that everybody hitting the target is going to be more effective. To showcase the talents that I would recommend, I'm going to get a look at a commander I have at level 60. This is going to be another Viking commander. It is Harold Sigurdsson. He's got the exact same talent trees, which is why we can make this comparison. So these are going to be the builds that I would recommend. And this first one right here, I would recommend this build. This is the one I would use. It's kind of weird, but let me explain what's happening here. First and foremost, you desperately want to fire off active skills as frequently as you can to keep that debuff uptime as high as possible. To that end, you're getting Rejuvenate for generating rage every time an active skill is used, and also Feral Nature for a chance to basically reduce the time it takes to fire off your active skills by about 1 turn every time it triggers. That's not exactly how it works. It's a 10% chance to gain 100 rage, but there is no internal cooldown on this thing, so you could have this fire off back to back to back, and your skills go really fast if you get really lucky. I've also gone in and reduced the counterattack damage that you're taking by 9%. These are points that are very, very good if you find yourself in combat where you're usually not the primary target and you're just wailing on targets, having an opportunity to apply these debuffs. All you're taking is their AoE skill damage and their counterattack damage. So reducing the counterattack damage is really great in that situation. I opted in this build to get a bunch of March speed. I went all the way to Fleet of Foot, only putting 2 points in there because I ran out of talent points to use. And the remainder of my points went into Undying Fury to generate even more rage. Obviously, you want to get as much rage as possible with this commander. And then Strong of Body, increasing the health of all infantry by 6%. And I really would recommend that with this commander, you just stick with using infantry. You're all in on the infantry plan with Bjorn Ironside. Now, there are, of course, variations on this build that I think are still very strong. One would be to go all in on the infantry tree. To basically say, I actually really want the ability to reduce my damage taken when I'm being attacked directly. To manipulate the march speed of the enemy is also very valuable. You could go with a full infantry tree build here, including these 1% buffs off to the side. I also then go and get Rejuvenate and try to reduce the skill damage taken by 6% and boost my skill damage dealt by 3%. I think this build is also quite solid, and the gains by being in the full skill tree are probably very incremental in nature. Yeah, I think the skill tree is the better way to go, but it's probably only a little bit better than this build right here, which does give you good utility and reduces the damage that you take. The final build is a little bit of a hybrid, going all in on the infantry tree, maxing things out, shedding just a couple points that we had off to the side over here in order to free them up to go and get Buckler Shield. In order to pick this up, we also made a sacrifice to our skill damage very slightly. We're dealing, 3% less skill damage? Not that big of a deal. We've also reduced our health a little bit over here. Strong of Body only has 1 point instead of the 3 that you could have. So there are some stats that you're losing when you make this trade-off. I'm not sure which of the 2 builds we were just showing are better, the one that we have on the screen now or this one over here. And I'll just make one final recommendation for a build that you could also consider, which is that if you didn't want to have a bunch of march speed, if you felt like you didn't need to go into the conquering tree, you could use a full skill with a little bit of the infantry tree to support it. This is a build I use on my Guan Yu, and I think it's very strong. This will be the build right over here. You're sacrificing the conquering tree in order to pick up, a little bit of tankiness over here and hold the line, making it so that there's a 10% chance when you're attacked to reduce all damage taken by 20% for the next 2 seconds after being attacked. I actually think that's a very strong talent. Certainly, you could argue that going for this is better than some of the other builds that I was showing you before. What I will point out is that we're sacrificing just a massive amount of march speed to make that happen. There's 6% over here, 6% over here, another 4% that we had over here. So that's a solid 16% march speed that we're sacrificing. That is a lot of march speed. So I personally like the build that I recommended over here. We actually do have several infantry conquering skill tree commanders, don't we? I think that I prefer this wonky build for the open field for a commander where you really are trying to fire off that active skill as frequently as possible. Now we get to talk all about the pairings, which is definitely fun. Let me start by saying that I really do recommend Bjorn Ironside in KVK seasons 1 through 3. After that point, if you run around with a epic commander primary, you're in trouble. People are going to hunt you down. If you're using Bjorn as a secondary in the Season of Conquest, I think you're probably just better off using Sun Tzu and using fewer marches. So I just want to be really clear that my perspective on this commander is that he's an early game commander. He's also really good in Ark of Osiris, and I suppose we could talk about him with some legendaries for Ark of Osiris as well. For players that are in younger realms, don't have their commander depth built out yet, I think he is one of the top 3 epics that players probably should be investing in, especially if you care about Ark of Osiris and you do big brawls in the middle. But let's get right into what I think is the best epic pair. It's just hands down, no question. In my eyes, these two were just a match made in heaven. That's Bjorn Ironside primary with a Sun Tzu secondary. I've mentioned this several times in other videos, and it's for good reason. He is going to generate a ton of extra rage for every target he hits. But the reason you use the Bjorn Ironside primary is you are increasing the skill damage taken and then freaking wrecking them with Sun Tzu's AoE, doing a ton of damage, and it gets extra damage, and for each target you hit, you generate rage. Which means Bjorn's going to have more uptime on his skill damage taken debuff, which is just amazing. In addition, we've got 20% extra skill damage dealt. Tremendous synergy with Bjorn Ironside's 4th skill and active skill. Boosting the damage that you'll be dealing there is absolutely fantastic. Sun Tzu is going to give you a little bit of tankiness, health, and damage taken. It's premium. It doesn't really get more premium than that on an epic. That's it right there. The very best for tankiness on an epic. It's very strong. So I think that that is your number 1 combo. Now, of course, Sun Tzu is a popular commander, and for good reason. You'll probably want to use him potentially in some other places. So if you were going to put Sun Tzu somewhere else, who could you pair with Bjorn? You've got several options here. One would be to use a little bit of a glass cannon, but she generates rage, which is very important for keeping the uptime on your debuff, and that would be Boudica. Boudica gives you a little bit of sustain from healing. She boosts your rage gen just a little bit. She does a lot of damage. I think it's a little bit of a glass cannon combo. You could do it. I think in the early game, it'll be interesting. It'll be strong. You're going to be working on Boudica anyways, because I advocate that players in the early game get a Peacekeeper leveled up very quickly, powered up, skilled up very quickly. I think that's a strong choice. You could also pair with Ulji Mundok, get a lot of debuffs going. Ulji brings just a little bit of tankiness with the 15% increased defense. He's got a little bit of kind of a clapback thing going on. When you're getting hit, you strike back for extra damage on the next turn. I think it's okay. I don't think this pair is as good because he doesn't have area of effect damage. You really want to have the area of effect damage from Bjorn followed up by area of effect damage from the secondary commander, and you're just not going to get that with this combo. And in that regard, there's just not that many epics that are going to bring that AoE damage that also offer the same troop type, and I don't think it's a great play to be mixing the different troop types. Like, you could put Baibars with Bjorn, but I just don't think that's very good. Now, at the legendary tier, there just aren't that many infantry that do skill damage in the early game. And that's going to be kind of a tough one. In the early game, if you're looking for a pair with Bjorn, I'm going to cruise through these, give you some recommendations, and I'll recommend a few top pairs that really rise above the others. And I'll give you a few strategies here. So, for example, with Constantine, Richard I, and Charles Martel, with all these commanders, you would use Bjorn as the secondary commander. You are hiding him. You're hiding him because you're worried that folks will target you because they know he's a good debuffer, and you know that when people see you've got an epic commander primary, they generally just think you're weaker and are going to hunt you down, and they're probably not wrong about that. So Constantine, Richard, and Charles Martel are all fine choices. I think Constantine might be the strongest choice just because he's got the support tree. You'll fire off those skills more frequently. But if you want your Bjorn to be ignored, put him behind Richard I or Charles Martel. People will prioritize targeting those last. One commander I think we need to take a serious look at is actually Ethelflaed. People still are going to focus down an Ethelflaed primary, but if your Sun Tzu is deployed somewhere else, Ethel with a Bjorn as the backup is still really great. In fact, support tree is going to fire off those debuffs really quickly. As far as marches go for debuffing targets in the early game, the two of them together is really premium. I mean, that's a massive set of debuffs you're applying here. You are reducing their attack, defense, and health by 30% and making them take 15% more skill damage. Wow. Yeah, that's a really solid choice. For commanders that you'll get access to in the early game as well, Alexander the Great, I don't think this is a great pair. I think that Bjorn will be fine hiding behind Alexander the Great, but he doesn't have a rage engine. So it's not the combination I would prioritize. In fact, by the time you get Alexander the Great, I mean, wouldn't you be using Alex with Sun Tzu? Almost certainly, right? That's the combination you'd be using, I would think. So if that's the case, Bjorn gets kind of kicked out because you'd rather have those two together than have a Bjorn secondary. By the time that later infantry commanders arrive into the game, like Guan Yu and Harold, I really don't think you should be using Bjorn, Trajan, and so on. But when we get back to a few early game commanders, you could pair Freddy with him. I just don't think it's amazing. I really don't think that Caesar is a great choice either because he's not doing a bunch of skill damage. However, there is one commander that is probably overlooked here, and that would be Mehmed. I think that a Mehmed secondary to Bjorn Ironside would be pretty solid. Mehmed does AoE damage. That's pretty sweet. He also boosts your own attack and skill damage. I think that if you use this march, it's going to be pretty slow moving. People are going to focus it down because it doesn't have much tankiness. I think it's just okay. I think it's an okay early game combo in the same way that you could pair with, heck, let's talk about Lu Bu, right? Lu Bu paired with Bjorn. It's the same idea. Like, they both have really great debuffs, AoE damage, all that is great. I'm just not terribly excited about those combinations. So you can see, by the way, with my reaction here, that I feel like Bjorn will drop off pretty quickly as you get other options for commanders that are going to do really high skill damage. Okay? There are other commanders like Leonidas is a great commander. He'd be good with anybody you pair with, right? He'd elevate the heck out of any epic. You look at a commander like Moctezuma even, I mean, I don't know, that would just be kind of a weird choice. And then Mulan, I mean, that pair doesn't make a lot of sense either. No, I think your best bet is the early game pairing that we recommended with the Sun Tzu. And then once you get later on, you just hide him behind a commander like Richard I, Martel, or Constantine, and you use him in like a mid-brawl fight in Ark of Osiris. But if you're in a KVK situation, hopefully by that point you've got just some better options for commander pairings. And I think that using commanders like Alex with Sun Tzu and Isong with El Cid and just stop there and those are the only two marches you bring is probably just a stronger choice than trying to fit Bjorn into that lineup. One final piece of advice I'll offer if you're skilling him up in the early game is that you really want to focus on skills other than the second skill. So the way you would work on this commander is you'd max the first skill, then you'd take him all the way to 4 stars, and you'd hope that your skill ups land on number 3 and number 4 and avoid number 2, but I wouldn't sweat it too much because, I mean, you're just going to expertise this dude in the not too distant future anyways, and you'll be good to go. Hey, 2 final considerations. I mentioned hiding your Bjorn behind Constantine, Richard, or Charles, and I just want to mention the fact that if that's what you're doing, you're probably even just better off using Joan of Arc for that activity. This is part of the reason why I think Bjorn is just a really strong early game commander, but I wouldn't use him in the mid to kind of late game when you're heading towards Season of Conquest. And the final consideration I'll give you is that, okay, I just said that, but just to see how good Bjorn could be, Cortex was actually using this commander when we were playing in the Champions of Olympia game mode, and we were battling against some top-tier teams. He used Bjorn with Harold, and of course he's using the Harold Sigurdsson secondary because that commander does tons and tons of skill damage. And he did very, very well using this pairing. So just something to keep in mind that I don't think he'll be great in the late game, but if you've got good enough equipment, I mean, you definitely can make it work. If you found this video helpful, then do me a favor and throw a like on here. Consider subscribing for those daily Rise of Kingdoms videos designed to help you get value and smash your enemies. And if you're looking for more epic commander guides, I'll have a card up in the top with a playlist giving you access to talents for every epic in Rise of Kingdoms. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.